Abigail sat sadly at the window of her small apartment and watched the same depressing picture for a day in a row. It was late autumn outside. Gusts of wind were tearing the last leaves from the trees, and the relentless drizzle was adding to the already dismal gray picture. And the young woman's mood was no better. A month ago, her husband Vincent had gone to work, and she had not heard from him since then. It was difficult to get a job in their town. Abigail had recently graduated from nursing school and had just gotten a job as a nurse a week ago. Once, after a whole day of tedious job hunting, Vincent came home in high spirits. He told his wife that he had accidentally met his childhood friend, Irvin. The friend had just found a well-paid job in the north and called Vincent along. "Abigail, I will work for 6 months and will make great money. We'll get a mortgage and we will be able to think about our future children." Abigail listened to him and could not believe that her husband was ready to leave her for 6 months so easily. She understood, of course, and that he was trying for their better future, especially knowing how much she wanted children. But now Abigail was ready to wait with the children, just not to be separated from her beloved. But Vincent assured Abigail that everything would be fine, and these 6 months would fly by unnoticed. But afterwards, they would have enough money. In the evening, Irvin came to visit them. They discussed everything together, drank a little wine, and Abigail noticed that Irvin kept his eyes on her all evening. Abigail felt uncomfortable. When he left, she openly told her husband everything she thought about Irvin and asked him not to invite him again. "Come on, he's all right. You just don't know him very well," defended Vincent. "I don't even want to know him. I only care about one thing now, how I'll live here alone without you," said Abigail bitterly, and leaned on her husband's strong shoulder. She tried to persuade him to take her along, and she was ready to do any work there. But Vincent was absolutely against it, because the living conditions were too harsh for a woman. Abigail saw her husband off with a heavy heart, and after returning home from the train station, fell on their marital bed and lay there for many hours, unable to get up from grief and melancholy. And now she stood at the window, as if trying to see something good through the cloudy cloak of rain. But she was only more and more tormented by her worries. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock on the door, and Abigail even shuddered. She rushed to the door in the hope that it was the mailman with a letter from her husband. But there was a serious man in a policeman's uniform on the doorstep. He showed her his ID and immediately asked if she knew where her husband Vincent was. Abigail said her husband had gone up north and she hadn't heard from him in a month. "Please accept my condolences. I must inform you that your husband's body was found in the woods. Apparently, he had been attacked by a bear. His body, unfortunately, was badly damaged, so we will not be able to identify him. We were able to confirm his identity from the passport we found in his jacket pocket." Abigail felt an unbearable pain come over her, squeezing her temples with a steel hoop. She felt nauseous. Her legs felt cotton and everything went blank. She awoke the next morning in the hospital. She could hardly open her eyes, looked around and felt pain again. She wanted to fall back into oblivion and not return to a reality in which there was no longer her sweetheart, the one with whom she was going to live a long and happy life. In the evening, the ward door opened and the same policeman reappeared. "The coffin with your husband's body has already been brought in. You need to bury him. We will help you with the funeral arrangements, but you must pull yourself together because the deceased had no one except you." Abigail became hysterical, and the nurse who came to see her scream gave her a sedative injection. The funeral went like a delirium. It seemed to Abigail that all this was not happening to her, and she could not get out of it. It seemed to her that Vincent was alive, and that this was all some kind of horrible dream. A month went by. One day there was a knock on the door. Reluctantly, Abigail opened the door and saw Vincent's friend on the threshold. Irvin was smiling, but noticing Abigail's condition and Vincent's portrait in a mournful frame, confusedly asked what happened. "Don't you know? But you left together." "So we were in different carriages," Irvin began confusedly explaining, When I arrived, he wasn't there, and I thought he'd changed his mind and decided to come back to you. The thought that her husband had decided to return to her and therefore probably got off the train before reaching his destination made Abigail feel worse. She sank tiredly into a chair and cried. Irvin brought her a glass of water and tried to comfort her, but the woman was inconsolable. Abigail, well, don't cry. Time will pass and you will feel better. No, I'll never get over it, whispered Abigail, staring at one point. Irvin sat by her side until the night before, and when he left, he asked her if she needed anything to bring next time. I don't need anything. No need to come here either. She replied sharply and slammed the door behind her guest. Another month passed. Abigail tried to spend all her time at work in the hospital, just to distract herself from her gloomy thoughts and spend less time at home. Irvin still continued to visit her sometimes, bringing her fruit and candy, and one day he suddenly came right to her work at the end of the day with a bouquet of flowers and offered to take a walk. I'm tired and I don't want to, replied Abigail. Well, I won't insist. I'm going away for a few months, and when I come back, I'll visit you again. Maybe you'll change your opinion about me. I liked you at first sight and would love to help you brighten up your loneliness. Abigail's indignation was boundless. I didn't like you at first sight, not for nothing. And Vincent considered you were called a friend, she shouted angrily. And after giving the man a resounding slap, she quickly walked away. A few months passed, and one day Irvin reappeared outside Abigail's house. He caught up with Abigail after work and began talking about his feelings again. Abigail, I'm sorry, but I think about you all the time. Let's get married and move away from the sad memories. I promise you'll be happy with me. I could only be happy with Vincent. Don't waste your time on me. Go away and never come into my life again, please, she said sharply. But Irvin kept coming back anyway, and she kept repeating the same thing every time. 5 years passed, and Abigail realized that she needed to change something in her life. She saved up some money, packed her things, quit her job, and left for the city where she had once dreamed to move with Vincent. Once she arrived in the city, she quickly rented a small apartment. Several more days were spent looking for work, and soon she began working as a nurse in a bus depot. Abigail didn't like this place very much, so she was going to keep looking for a job as a nurse in a hospital. But soon the unexpected happened. In her office came a man, strikingly similar to Vincent, only his hair was already slightly touched with gray, and there were wrinkles in the corners of his eyes. She stared at him without blinking, but he looked at her indifferently and laid the papers on the table. She looked at the papers, saw the name and surname, and tears streamed from her eyes. Abigail, let's not get hysterical. I'm in a hurry. Just sign the papers, said the man. Hearing his voice, Abigail had no more doubts. It was Vincent. She threw herself on his neck. Why have I been so cruelly deceived? Weren't you the one who cheated? Replied Vincent stiffly and took a step back. Me? Abigail gasped with tears. I have been visiting your grave for 5 years. I wanted to die with you. And you? It was you who deceived me. There was a flicker of incomprehension in Vincent's eyes, and his voice became a little softer. He hesitated for a second and then told his story. As it turned out, in the train, his jacket with all his money and documents was stolen. There was no connection to where he arrived, and he couldn't even send a letter. But soon Irvin's mother fell ill, and he went to visit her. With him, Vincent sent a letter and his first paycheck to Abigail. When Irvin returned, he said that Abigail was not at home, and that according to her neighbors, she had moved somewhere with another man. Vincent believed, thinking his wife was a traitor, and stayed working for a couple more years, and then, after earning money, bought an apartment in the city and got a job at the bus depot as a driver. When Vincent heard Abigail's story, he grabbed his head. My darling! It turns out you buried and mourned the thief who robbed me, Vincent said sadly and pressed his lips to Abigail's hands. What a fool I have been. What can I do to make you forgive me? I don't know. The most important thing is that you are alive and we found each other. Abigail smiled through her tears. And by the way, I didn't like Irvin right away. It's okay. I'll deal with him yet. Several years passed. When Vincent and Abigail already had their second child, they decided to go to their hometown and sell their old apartment. Vincent couldn't help himself and went to his ex-friend's house to hold him responsible for his actions. But the door was opened to him by a man with a flabby face and hardly standing on his feet. He reeked of booze and filth, and behind the man's back, the entire floor was littered with empty bottles and some kind of garbage. What a meeting, muttered Irvin. But Vincent had already turned around and walked away, realizing that life had punished this man